Hello everyone, and welcome back to NPA Discovery, the place where we uncover the real stories behind the stars you thought you knew. If you're passionate about music history, untold truths, and lessons hidden in the rise and fall of icons, then you've come to the right place. Today's episode takes us deep into the fascinating life of Davy Jones, the teen idol who captured the hearts of millions as the charming frontman of the Monkees. But while his voice and smile seemed to embody pure joy, behind the curtain lay a story filled with struggle, secrecy, and decisions that would shape not only his career but also his entire legacy. The title of today's story might surprise some: The Untold Story of Davy Jones, Fame, Secrets, and the Hidden Struggles Behind the Monkees star. At first, you might think, wait, wasn't Davy Jones just the cheeky, lovable singer who lived every teenager's dream in the 1960s? Why use words like hidden struggles and secrets? That's exactly why this story is so important. Because like so many stars of that golden era, Davy Jones lived two lives: the public image carefully polished for screaming fans, and the private world where he wrestled with choices, losses, and battles that fans never knew about until much later. Now before we begin, a quick reminder: don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing you these deep dives into music's most fascinating figures. Davy Jones's story begins on December 30th, 1945, in Manchester, England, where he grew up as the only son among three sisters. That's an important detail. He grew up in a household surrounded by women, which perhaps explains some of the softness and charm in his personality that fans adored later. But tragedy didn't spare him. At just 14 years old, Davy's life changed forever when his mother passed away from emphysema. Losing a parent so young doesn't just leave a gap, it shapes who you become. Psychologists often point out that when children experience such a loss, they either withdraw into themselves, or they run toward achievement, desperately seeking validation in the wider world. For Davy, both paths would play out. On one hand, he dreamed of escaping grief by throwing himself into his love for horses, training as a jockey at Newmarket stables. On the other hand, the stage kept calling his name, whether he liked it or not. And here's where fate stepped in. His trainer, Basil Foster, happened to know a casting director. Imagine that: one day you're training to race horses, and the next, someone is saying, you'd be perfect for the stage. It shows us something important: often our paths in life aren't chosen in straight lines. They zigzag, sometimes violently, between passions, tragedies, and sheer accidents. With Foster's push, Davy auditioned for the role of the Artful Dodger in the musical Oliver. And he got it. Now let's pause here. This wasn't just a small role in a community theater. This was a West End production that later made its way to Broadway in New York. For a teenager who had recently lost his mother, this wasn't just a career opportunity, it was therapy. Performing gave him purpose, routine, and applause at a time when his world had been cracked open by grief. In fact, his performance was so strong he earned a Tony Award nomination. Not bad for a boy who once thought his future lay on horseback. And then, almost by divine coincidence, Davy Jones's Broadway career placed him at the exact right place at the exact right time. In 1964, the Beatles performed for the first time on American television during The Ed Sullivan Show. That night changed music history. But guess who else was on the same episode of that show? That's right, Davy Jones. While the world screamed for John, Paul, George, and Ringo, a teenage Davy watched backstage, taking it all in. He later recalled, "I watched the Beatles from the side of the stage. I saw the girls going crazy, and I said to myself, this is it. I want a piece of that." And this moment teaches us something very human. All of us, at one time or another, have seen someone else succeed and thought, I want that life. For some, that dream fades. For others, like Davy, it becomes fuel that burns for years. From this point forward, Davy Jones didn't just want to act. He wanted to become a star who could command the stage, the cameras, and, most importantly, the audience's hearts. A couple of years later, That dream became reality when producers Bert Schneider and Bob Rafelson decided to create a TV show inspired by the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night. Their idea was simple: make a fictional band that was funny, charming, and relatable to young audiences. But here's the twist: while the Monkees were supposed to be fictional, their popularity made them a real band. That's like writing a sitcom about superheroes, and then finding out fans demand they actually go out and save people in real life. When Davy auditioned, he wasn't handed the role on a silver platter. Even though he had a contract with Screen Gems, producers still made him prove himself. And he did. With his small stature, charming smile, and unmistakable British accent, he became the group's heartthrob, the one every teenage girl plastered on her bedroom wall. But let's be honest, the Monkees were not meant to be taken seriously at first. Music critics mocked them as the Prefab Four, a play on the Beatles' Fab Four nickname. Yet, here's the lesson: sometimes the joke becomes the legend. Because whether critics liked it or not, the Monkees' records topped charts, and their show became a phenomenon. Now, let's take a deeper look at the fascinating turn in Davy Jones's life. Because before he was the heartthrob on every teenage girl's wall, he wasn't dreaming about bright lights or screaming fans at all. He was dreaming about saddles, horses, and racetracks. You see, when tragedy struck his family at such a young age, it shaped his heart in ways few can imagine. His mother's passing didn't just leave a wound, it left him searching for something stable, something grounding. And for Davy, that sanctuary came in the form of horses. Imagine it: while his classmates were preparing for exams, sharpening pencils, and planning their futures in classrooms, Davy was out in the crisp morning air, brushing down horses and preparing to ride. Instead of memorizing textbooks, he was memorizing the feel of reins in his hands. He wasn't playing at it, he was serious. In fact, he trained at Newmarket, one of the most prestigious horse racing stables in Britain. But here's the lesson we can all take from this moment in his life: sometimes, our destiny will find us even when we run in the opposite direction. Because no matter how fast Davy rode, no matter how far he galloped, show business was waiting for him at the finish line. Why? Because fate has a funny way of weaving people into our lives. His horse racing trainer, Basil Foster, was friends with a casting director who just happened to be looking for a teenage boy. And just like that, Foster, who believed Davy's future was with horses, opened a door that would take him back to the stage. This was no small break. Davy was cast as the Artful Dodger in Oliver. And if you've ever seen Oliver on stage, you'll know, this isn't a role you fake your way through. It requires cheekiness, charm, energy, and timing. And Davy delivered. He didn't just play the part, he became it. Audiences in London and New York adored him, and the critics agreed. He even earned a Tony Award nomination. Now here's the fascinating connection. On the very night the Beatles made their legendary debut on The Ed Sullivan Show, young Davy Jones was also on that stage, performing as the Artful Dodger. Imagine being a teenager, standing backstage, watching John, Paul, George, and Ringo whip a crowd into hysteria. Davy later said that in that moment, he looked out at the screaming fans and thought, this is it. I want a piece of that. This is the pivotal moment where Davy's story becomes more than just the tale of a boy who wanted to ride horses. It becomes the story of a boy who saw the power of music, the power of connection, and decided he wanted to inspire people the same way the Beatles did. And let's pause here, because there's a universal truth hidden in this moment. How many of us have had that one, defining experience where we realized, I want that. That's my path. For some, it's watching someone give a powerful speech. For others, it's hearing a teacher who changes your perspective. For Davy, it was watching the Beatles electrify a generation. That moment lit a fire inside him, and he would chase it for the rest of his life. After winning over critics and audiences alike as the Artful Dodger, Davy Jones had a choice to make. He could continue building a career on Broadway, or he could lean into something bigger, something louder, something that could reach not just a few hundred people in a theater, but millions around the world. And so, in 1965, he took a leap. Davy signed a contract with Colpix Records and recorded his first solo single, What Are We Going to Do? It was a light-hearted tune, innocent, charming, exactly the kind of song that showcased his sweet voice and boyish charm. And although the single didn't shoot to the top of the charts, it did something more important: it introduced him to the world as a singer. Now, remember that fire Davy felt the night he watched the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show? That vision of becoming part of something cultural, something global. Well, destiny was already working behind the scenes to make that vision a reality. Because in Los Angeles, producers Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider were cooking up an idea that seemed crazy at the time: a television show about a fictional rock band. The show would feature comedy, music, and quick-cut editing inspired by the Beatles' film A Hard Day's Night. They wanted 4 young men, each with a distinct personality, to form this made-for-TV band. And here's where timing, charisma, and destiny collided. Davy's Broadway experience, his recording contract, and his undeniable teen idol looks put him at the top of the list. Out of 437 hopefuls who auditioned, Davy didn't just stand out, he was already practically guaranteed a spot. The producers had found their heartthrob. The cute one. The boy every girl would dream about. And so, in 1965, Davy Jones officially became 1/4 of what would soon be one of the biggest pop sensations of the decade, the Monkees. But let's stop here for a moment, because this is where the story gets complicated. The Monkees were marketed as a band, but at first, they weren't playing their own instruments on the recordings. The music was created by top studio musicians in Los Angeles. To the producers, this wasn't deception, it was efficiency. To fans, it didn't matter at first, because the songs were catchy, the TV show was hilarious, and the boys were adorable. But to the Monkees themselves, especially to Davy Jones, who knew what it meant to earn applause night after night on stage, it was frustrating. They didn't want to be puppets. They wanted to be musicians. Artists. And that tension, between being entertainers versus being true artists, would define much of Davy's journey in the years to come. Still, let's not forget, for millions of teenagers, Davy Jones wasn't just an actor on a quirky TV show. He was the dream boy, the one whose picture they taped to their bedroom walls, the one whose voice made them swoon through the crackling sound of a vinyl record. When the Monkees premiered on NBC in September of 1966, no one, not even the producers, could have predicted the tidal wave that was coming. Within weeks, the show wasn't just popular. It was a phenomenon. Teenagers rushed home from school to catch it. Kids memorized every scene, every joke, every smile. And at the heart of it all was Davy Jones, the boy with the British accent, the gentle eyes, and that unmistakable voice. Almost overnight, Davy became a household name. His face was on every magazine cover, from Tiger Beat to 16 magazine. Fan mail poured in by the thousands. Girls screamed his name at concerts, fainted at public appearances, and carried his picture in their wallets. He wasn't just popular. He was adored. And the music? That was the spark that lit the fire. Songs like Last Train to Clarksville, I'm a Believer, and Daydream Believer climbed straight to the top of the charts. Suddenly, this manufactured band was rivaling the Beatles in sales and chart success. At one point, in fact, the Monkees outsold both the Beatles and the Rolling Stones combined. For Davy, the experience was surreal. Just 3 years earlier, he was a young actor performing in Oliver. Now he was living inside the hysteria he had once watched from the sidelines as the Beatles performed on Ed Sullivan. But with fame came pressure. The Monkees worked grueling schedules, filming the TV show by day, recording songs by night, and performing live whenever they could. Davy, in particular, bore the weight of being the group's heartthrob. While Mickey, Peter, and Mike could sometimes blend into the background, Davy was constantly in the spotlight. He was the one the cameras focused on, the one fans wanted most. And here's where Davy's charm really mattered. Unlike some who might have grown arrogant, Davy stayed grounded. He knew where he came from. He didn't dismiss the fans as silly teenagers, he cherished them. He smiled, he signed autographs, he performed with genuine joy. Because to him, the fans weren't just consumers. They were family. But behind the glitz, cracks were starting to form. The Monkees were hungry to prove they were more than just TV actors singing someone else's songs. They wanted creative control, to write and play their own music. And that battle for authenticity would soon create tension, not only with the producers but within the band itself. Yet, during those peak years, 1966 to 1968, Davy Jones was on top of the world. He wasn't just part of a band. He was part of a cultural movement. Teenagers dreamed of him. Parents recognized him. And music history had carved his name into its storybook forever. When the news broke on the morning of June 29, 1967, the world was in shock. Newspapers ran headlines that seemed almost unreal: Jayne Mansfield killed in car crash. Fans simply couldn't process that the glamorous blonde bombshell, who had lit up both Hollywood screens and Las Vegas stages, was suddenly gone at just 34 years old. Her 3 children in the back seat, Miklos, Zoltan, and Mariska, miraculously survived, though they were scarred both physically and emotionally. Mariska Hargitay, who was only 3 years old, grew up carrying the memory of that night in silence, later becoming a celebrated actress in her own right. The crash itself changed more than just lives, it altered road safety forever. The horrific collision led to the widespread adoption of the Mansfield bar, the underride guard now found on the back of most large trucks. It became a grim reminder that her death was not in vain. But Jayne's legacy is complicated. To many, she was a Hollywood starlet who lived fast, loved extravagantly, and died tragically. To others, she was a savvy woman who understood how to use her image in an industry that often sought to control women. Even today, her story is retold not just as a tale of tragedy, but as a cautionary reminder of the fragility of fame, and the fleeting nature of life itself. Jayne Mansfield's life was a whirlwind, filled with glamour, scandal, and a hunger for stardom that burned brightly until the very end. She lived without fear, chasing fame in a way that few dared to, and while that pursuit brought her success, it also brought heartbreak. Her tragic final moments on that Mississippi highway froze her forever in time, not as a fading star, but as a symbol of Hollywood's golden age and its dangerous shadows. Today, her name still lingers in pop culture, whispered in the myths of Hollywood lore. Some remember the sensational headlines, others the shocking photographs, but those who look deeper see a woman who was more than the caricature of a blonde bombshell. She was a mother, a fighter, and a dreamer who tried to turn fantasy into reality. In the end, Jayne's story is both a cautionary tale and a haunting reminder: fame can be dazzling, but it is also fragile, and sometimes it comes at a price far greater than anyone expects. So when we remember Jayne Mansfield, we don't just remember